You won't believe what my own granddaughter did to me. After everything I sacrificed, the nights I stayed up holding her through heartbreak, the thousands I poured into her big day, she called me basic. And that was just the beginning. Before I tell you the rest, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from. This one's going to stay with you for a while. I never expected to be the villain in my own family's story. I suppose it crept up on me. One quiet dismissal at a time, one thankless gesture, one phone call that never came. And yet when Madison, my first granddaughter, the girl I used to rock to sleep on my chest, looked me dead in the eye and called me too basic for her bridal shower, something inside me shattered so cleanly, it made no sound at all. She didn't say it to my face. Oh no, that would have required courage. She said it in a group text I was accidentally left in. They were discussing the final touches of her bridal shower, the one I was paying for out of my retirement account. I had spared no expense. Custom linen napkins with her monogram, a floral arch flown in from Savannah, and a vineyard-style venue nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Everything she wanted. But in that message thread, she laughed. Can we make sure Grandma doesn't come in her usual Kohl's outfit? This vibe is luxury, not basic. Another message chimed in, probably one of her sorority friends. Ugh, yes, she gives me cafeteria lady energy. Then a third, from my own daughter, Claire. Let's just tell her we're keeping it small. She'll understand. My hands were trembling when I read it. At first, I thought I must have misunderstood. Maybe it was meant for another chat, maybe autocorrect. But no, my name was there, plain as day. So was the casual cruelty. I sat in the quiet of my kitchen for a long time. The tea kettle whistled and whistled before I remembered I'd even put it on. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I smiled. A strange, hollow smile I didn't recognize. Wish you all the best, darling, I typed back. Hope it's everything you dreamed. And then I called the venue. Hi, this is Eleanor McCarthy, I said, steady and sweet as pie. I'd like to cancel the reservation for June 14th. No reschedule. Just cancel. Thank you kindly. They were shocked. The woman on the line offered to waive the cancellation fee. I told her not to worry about it. I had other plans for the money. That night, I packed away the guest favors into a box and labeled it for donation. I transferred the refund into the account I used for charity work and sent the full amount to a women's shelter across town. I included a note in honor of all the women who were told they were too basic to belong. I didn't tell a soul. The morning of the shower came with sunshine and a soft breeze. I sat across the street from the now empty venue, sipping iced tea from a thermos and watching the chaos unfold. Cars pulled in one after another. Heels clicked on pavement. Pastel dresses fluttered. And then the panic. Phones were pulled out. Doors rattled. A few angry calls were made. I recognized Madison's voice before I even saw her. What do you mean it's canceled? My grandma reserved this. Call her. She was frantic, embarrassed, her face flushed crimson in the sun. I watched for a moment longer, then stood and walked away. I should have felt guilt. Maybe a better woman would have. But all I felt was a quiet sort of peace, like I'd finally stopped holding my breath after years underwater. Later that week, the calls started coming. Claire first. Mom, what happened at the shower? I wouldn't know, I said, folding laundry with deliberate calm. I wasn't invited. There was a long pause. You didn't have to cancel it. But I did. It was mine to cancel. They didn't say much after that. Just silence, awkward and sharp like broken glass. I didn't expect an apology. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But word got around town. People started asking questions. Eleanor McCarthy? The kind widow who donates turkeys every Thanksgiving? She ruined her granddaughter's bridal shower? It was funny, in a sad sort of way. No one had ever asked why I gave so much, or why I sat alone in church, or why my family never mentioned me in their social media posts. Even when I was standing 2 feet away, they only noticed when I pushed back. That week, I started a journal, not just of what had happened, but everything. The marriage, the lies, the family secrets I'd held onto like fire, burning my palms for decades. Each night, I poured pieces of myself onto those pages. I didn't know yet what I'd do with them. I only knew it was time to stop pretending. I had been quiet for too long, and something inside me, something powerful, was waking up. The next chapter of my life had already begun, and I had no idea just how explosive it would be. The knock came just after sunset. At first, I thought it might be one of the neighbors, perhaps Martha from across the street, bringing over her blackberry cobbler the way she always did when she sensed something was off. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Martha. It was a young woman, early 30s maybe, thin, wide-eyed, with a dusty canvas backpack slung over one shoulder and a camera bag in the other. "Mrs. McCarthy?" she asked, her voice soft but certain. "Yes." I kept the screen door closed. I'd learned to be cautious, especially with strangers who knew my name. "My name's Lily. I'm doing a documentary project on women like you." I raised a brow. "Women like me?" She flushed, looking flustered. "I mean, women over 60 who've, well, been erased by their families, by the system. Women who gave and then were pushed aside. I've been traveling across the South collecting stories. A woman at the shelter in Charlotte gave me your name. Said you saved her life." I felt my breath catch. It had been years. I could still remember the woman she spoke of, Mary Ann. She'd come into the shelter with a baby on her hip and bruises blooming like violets up her arm. I'd held her hand that night, told her she was strong enough to start over. I hadn't heard from her since. I opened the door slowly. "Come in, Lily." We sat at my kitchen table with the floral vinyl tablecloth I'd had for decades, sipping lemon tea while she set up her recorder. She didn't push, just waited, gently, as if she knew I needed time. I told her everything. The first time he lied to me. How it started small, working late, forgetting anniversaries, but turned into bigger things. How I once found a hotel key in his suit jacket pocket, and when I asked him about it, he laughed in my face. "Don't be dramatic, Ellie," he'd said. "You always make something out of nothing." I told her about the night I finally left, not with fury or slammed doors, just quiet resolve. I packed a single suitcase and left my wedding ring on the dresser. He didn't stop me, not even once. Lily listened, like every word mattered. "You were married for 35 years, she asked gently. 35 years, 3 kids, and a lifetime of being invisible." Her eyes filled with tears. And then I asked something I hadn't expected to. "Why are you really here, Lily?" She blinked. "I told you, the documentary—" "No." I leaned forward. "You knew my name, my full name. You didn't just get that from Mary Ann." She looked down at her tea. Her fingers trembled. I'm her daughter," she whispered. "Mary Ann's. You held me when I was a baby. I don't remember it, but she does. She said you gave her the strength to leave my father, said you were the reason she survived." I felt my throat tighten. "I wanted to find you," she continued, her voice cracking. "I wanted to say thank you, and I want to help you tell your story." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I reached across the table and took her hand. "You already are, sweetheart." In the days that followed, Lily and I became fast companions. She stayed in the guest room, filmed our interviews in the garden, the porch, the kitchen where so many battles had been fought and lost. She helped me scan old letters, organize photos, dig up court documents I'd buried deep in drawers. But more than that, she helped me remember who I used to be. Not just a mother or a wife or a grandmother, but Eleanor. Eleanor, who loved poetry, who once dreamed of being a teacher, who danced barefoot in the rain when she was 21 and kissed her high school sweetheart in the back of a red Ford pickup. That girl was still in there somewhere. And Lily, she reminded me that my story wasn't over yet. One night, she came downstairs with an idea. "I want to host a dinner," she said, eyes shining. "Invite your family. Pretend it's for the documentary. We'll say it's honoring the McCarthy legacy. They'll come for the cameras. And then you'll have the floor." I stared at her. "You want me to confront them?" "No. I want you to reclaim your voice." Something inside me hesitated. Fear, maybe. Habit. But I was tired of being quiet. Tired of folding myself into corners. Tired of pretending their indifference didn't hurt. So I nodded. "Let's do it." Lily threw herself into planning. She was fierce, efficient, determined. She rented a beautiful private room in a historic inn just outside town. She printed invitations with gold foil letters and even hired a photographer. Everyone thought it was about them, about their legacy. Little did they know. As the date drew closer, I felt the old ghosts stir. What if they laughed at me? What if they walked out? What if they twisted everything like they always had? But then I remembered something Lily had said our first night together. "You don't need their permission to matter." And just like that, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready, ready to speak, ready to burn it all down if I had to. And maybe, just maybe, ready to rise from the ashes. The inn sat nestled beneath weeping willows and strung with soft golden lights, like something out of a Southern Living magazine. It was the kind of place where memories lingered in the air like perfume. I'd attended weddings there, baby showers, even an anniversary party decades ago, back when my children still saw me as someone worth celebrating. Now I stood in the grand dining room, watching the staff place name cards at a long mahogany table, my heart thudding in my chest like it wanted out. Lily adjusted her camera equipment in the corner, dressed in a sleek black blazer, every inch the professional producer. She gave me a little nod. "This is your stage, Eleanor." I smoothed my navy dress with trembling hands. It was the same one I'd worn to Madison's high school graduation. Back then, she'd told me I looked elegant. I hadn't heard her call me that in years. The guests arrived in clusters. Claire, my daughter, walked in first, dressed in her usual perfection, pearl earrings, silk scarf, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Her husband trailed behind her, already texting someone. Madison followed shortly after, laughing too loudly, arm in arm with her fiancé, Evan. She was radiant. I'll give her that. Long waves of blonde hair, flawless makeup, a designer dress that screamed money and youth. She looked around, puzzled for a moment. "Wait, this isn't a restaurant?" she asked, blinking at the setup. "We rented the room privately for the documentary," Lily answered smoothly. "A tribute to the McCarthy family matriarch, a filmed dinner to preserve the legacy." That got their attention. "Oh, how lovely," Claire said, instantly slipping into hostess mode. "Well, we're honored. Aren't we, Maddie?" Madison smiled, tight-lipped. "Of course." The others trickled in. My 2 sons, one with his second wife, the other alone and brooding. A few cousins, old friends, all of them smiling, polite, unaware. We sat down. Plates clinked. Wine flowed. Conversation danced on the surface. Light and meaningless. Claire kept steering the camera toward herself whenever she spoke. And then Lily gave me the signal. I stood. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice softer than I wanted it to be. "This means a great deal to me." They all turned, surprised. "For years," I continued, "I've played a part in this family that I never auditioned for. I was the quiet one, the provider, the one who stayed behind and made sure there were casseroles in the freezer and Christmas cards mailed on time." I took a deep breath. "But I was also the one forgotten, silenced, discarded. And lately, I've begun to wonder, if a woman gives everything she has to the people she loves and they no longer remember who she is, did she ever really exist to them at all?" There was a stillness at the table. Even the forks stopped moving. Claire chuckled nervously. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the bridal shower." Madison stiffened. "I paid for everything," I said, turning to her. "The flowers, the food, the venue. I wanted it to be perfect for you. And in return, I was called basic, embarrassing, someone to be excluded." "Grandma, that was a private message," Madison said quickly, her cheeks red. "But it wasn't private to me. I read every word, and I canceled the shower. Not out of spite, out of clarity. For the first time, I saw how invisible I'd become." Silence. One of my sons cleared his throat. "I'm sure she didn't mean it, Mom." "Didn't mean it?" I said, now stronger, the fire rising. "What about the years your father cheated on me, and I kept the family together? What about the holidays you left me alone because your new wives didn't like my casseroles? What about the time I had surgery and no one called to check on me for 5 days?" The room was suffocating. "I stayed silent all these years to protect your image of a perfect family, but I'm not protecting you anymore." I turned to Lily, who lifted a manila envelope from her bag. "In here," I said, "are copies of every letter I wrote to your father during our divorce. The ones where I begged him not to turn you against me. The ones where I warned him what it would do to our children. And here," I reached into my handbag and pulled out another folder, "are photos of bruises, of empty bank accounts, of things I survived while smiling through birthday parties and graduations." Madison was crying now. Claire looked like she might faint. "I didn't invite you here to destroy you," I said gently. "I invited you to free myself." I sat down. My hands were shaking, but I felt lighter, like I'd just set down a burden I'd been carrying for 40 years. No one said a word, until Lily turned off the camera. Then Madison stood. Her voice was soft. "I didn't know, Grandma. I swear, I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. But now you do. The dinner ended early. No toasts, no more small talk. They left in waves, quiet, subdued. A few kissed my cheek. Most didn't. Lily helped me clean up. Her eyes were glassy. You were incredible, she whispered. I was honest, I corrected. She smiled. Same thing. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I'd told the truth. I'd broken the silence. But I could feel something else coming. Something buried even deeper. And I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I woke up the next morning to a ringing phone and the dull ache of a storm behind my eyes. It was Claire. Her name lit up the screen like a warning sign. I let it ring twice. 3 times. Then I picked up. Hello, Mom. Her voice was brittle. We need to talk. About? That performance last night, that stunt. I sat up slowly, easing my back against the headboard. You mean the truth? Claire sighed. You humiliated us. On camera. Do you even realize what you've done to this family? I closed my eyes for a long moment. What I've done? Claire, I didn't destroy this family. I just stopped pretending it was perfect. There was a pause, then a soft click. She hung up. I placed the phone on the nightstand and stared out the window. The sky was gray. Rain was coming. But I wasn't afraid of storms anymore. Later that day, Lily returned from a short trip into town, her cheeks flushed from the cold and her arms full of boxes. What's all this? I asked. She set them on the dining table and opened the lid. Inside were stacks of manila folders, copies of documents I hadn't seen in over 20 years, bank statements, legal filings, a letter with my name on the top in crisp black ink. I went to the county archives, she said, and I found something. She handed me the letter. It was dated May, my mother's handwriting. Dear Eleanor, I've changed my will. The farm is yours now. I know I should have done this years ago, but I couldn't bear to hurt your brother. Still, it's rightfully yours. You were the one who stayed. You were the one who sacrificed. My throat tightened. I remembered that letter. I'd found it after her funeral, tucked between the pages of her favorite Bible. I'd given it to my ex-husband to show the lawyer. He told me it wouldn't hold up. He told me not to fight. I believed him. Turns out, Lily said, he never submitted it. He buried it. Legally, the will is still valid. The land, Eleanor, the farm, it's yours. I stared at her. What? It's yours. We just have to challenge the transfer. I have a lawyer lined up. She said you have a real case. My heart pounded. That farm wasn't just land. It was legacy. It was where I was born, where my father taught me to fish, where my mother made apple pie every 4th of July. It was mine. And he'd stolen it with a signature and a lie. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. Call the lawyer, I said. Let's bring it all into the light. The process began that same week, and oh, how quickly the storm gathered. My ex-husband, Dr. Charles McCarthy, was furious. He called me personally, something he hadn't done in years. Eleanor, don't do this, he snapped. It'll embarrass the family. Think of the kids. The kids you turned against me? His silence was answer enough. You stole from me, I said. You made me feel small for decades, and now I'm taking it back. You don't know what you're starting. I smiled. Oh, Charlie, I do. For the first time in my life, I do. The court proceedings began within the month. Lily and I pored through old files, dug up every piece of evidence we could find. She even found a voicemail from years ago where Charles admitted the will had been misplaced. The courtroom was cold, formal. Claire was there, arms folded tight across her chest. Madison didn't come. Charles, seated at his attorney's table, looked older, thinner. Not the charming doctor everyone once adored, just a bitter man with too much pride and not enough shame. My lawyer, bless her heart, was fierce. She laid out everything, the will, the timeline, the silence that followed. Then she handed the judge the letter from my mother, the one Lily had recovered. The judge read it, his brow furrowed. Then he looked at me. Mrs. McCarthy, do you believe your late mother intended this farm to be yours? I stood. I don't just believe it, I said. I know it, and I would have fought for it if I hadn't been gaslit into thinking I didn't matter. But I do matter, and I'm not invisible anymore. There was a hush in the room. Then, slowly, the judge nodded. I find in favor of the petitioner. The gavel fell. Just like that, the farm was mine. Lily squeezed my hand so tight I thought it might break. I didn't care. I was laughing, crying, breathing in a way I hadn't in years. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I gave a single statement. I'm not here to ruin reputations. I'm here to reclaim mine. I walked away with my head high and my spine straight. It wasn't just about land. It was about truth, and it was just the beginning. 2 weeks after the ruling, I stood at the edge of my mother's old farm, boots sinking slightly into the soft, thawing earth. The house was tired. Its shutters hung loose. The paint was chipped, and weeds had claimed most of the garden. But to me, it was sacred ground. A heartbeat I thought I'd lost. Mine again. I breathed it in. The smell of wild honeysuckle, damp pine, memories. I walked the length of the property line, remembering summers spent chasing fireflies with my brothers, winters huddled by the fire while Mama read aloud from old books, her voice slow and sweet like syrup. I remembered the barn dances, the burnt pies, the tears. I remembered everything. And for the first time in decades, I felt whole. Lily arrived the next morning with a notepad full of ideas and a sparkle in her eye. We could restore it, she said. Turn the house into a women's retreat center, workshops, healing spaces, a place where women like you, women like me, can come to breathe. I hadn't even finished my coffee, and already she had sketches spread across the kitchen table. I was just planning to fix the porch swing, I joked. But something about her idea stirred me. A safe place, a fresh start, not just for me, but for all the invisible women I'd met over the years, the ones whose stories were never told, the ones who were always someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's shadow. I put my hand on hers. Let's do it. We started small, gutting the inside, replacing the windows, repainting the trim. Neighbors pitched in. Old friends brought tools and casseroles. Even the mayor stopped by one afternoon to say, "It's good to see this place come alive again." And it was. So was I. But just as the house began to shine, the phone rang again. It was Madison. Her voice cracked before she even said hello. "Grandma, can I come see you?" I paused, unsure. Then, yes, of course. She showed up 2 days later, wearing jeans and a hoodie, no makeup, her hair tied back in a loose bun. Not the polished version of herself I usually saw, just a girl, my granddaughter, shaking, nervous. She stood on the porch where I used to rock her to sleep. "Grandma," she began, "I didn't understand. About what you went through. About what you carried. I was cruel, and I'm so sorry." Her eyes filled with tears, and she took something out of her pocket. A frame. Inside it, the printout of the message thread. The one where she called me basic, but she'd changed it. The frame was painted gold, and beneath the glass, she'd written, "I was wrong. You're not basic. You're the foundation, and I'm proud to be your granddaughter." My chest ached. I reached out and pulled her into my arms. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means more than you know." She stayed for days after that, helped with the cleanup, cooked meals, asked questions, real ones, about my childhood, about the marriage, about everything. And I told her, not as a grandmother, not as a victim, but as Eleanor. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the fields, she stood with me by the old oak tree where Mama used to tie ribbons each spring. Madison looked at me, serious. "I've been thinking, maybe I don't want the big wedding, the glitz, the show." "Oh?" I asked, smiling gently. She nodded. "Maybe I just want this, family, truth, a chance to do it right." I said nothing, just took her hand in mine. That night, I found myself dancing alone in the living room. Jazz played from the old radio. My favorite song came on, At Last, by Etta James. I swayed slowly, arms outstretched, tears falling freely, because at last, I was seen. At last, I was whole. At last, I was me. And somewhere in the flicker of candlelight and the soft hum of music, I knew this was just the beginning, and the best was still to come. The morning of the wedding came with the scent of fresh-cut grass and magnolia blossoms, but there was no church, no cathedral, no string quartet playing in some stuffy hall. Instead, the farm was blooming. We'd transformed the space behind the old barn into a garden chapel, draped with linen and wildflowers, where sunlight streamed through trees like God himself had blessed the soil. The oak tree, Mama's ribbon tree, stood tall and proud, wrapped now in white silk and memories. Madison had asked to hold her wedding here, simple, intimate, true. There would be no diamond-studded centerpieces, No rented swans, no influencers pretending to care. Just family, real family, and redemption blooming in the most unlikely soil. Guests began arriving around noon. Neighbors, friends, folks from town who hadn't seen the farm like this since the summer of... There was laughter, hugs, music. I stood at the edge of the porch, watching them settle into white chairs on the lawn. Lily stood beside me, camera in hand, wearing the proudest smile I'd ever seen. "You ready for this?" she asked. I nodded. I've never been more ready. Then, just before the ceremony, a courier arrived with a thin envelope, handwritten, no return address. I opened it slowly, unsure what to expect. Inside was a letter from Charles. "Eleanor, you were right. I never saw you for who you were. I saw a version of you I could control, and when you stopped being that, I resented you. I know it's too late for forgiveness, but it's not too late for the truth. I'm stepping away from the practice. I've sold my share. Enclosed is a check. It's not enough. It never will be. But it's something. I've told the kids everything. Do with it what you will." Charles folded inside was a check for $10. I stared at it, not for the amount, but for what it meant. Not justice, not revenge, recognition. I didn't tell anyone, not that day, not yet. I slipped the letter into my Bible, right where Mama had once hidden her will. 2 women, both betrayed, and both redeemed. The music started. I took my seat at the front, heart full. Then Madison appeared at the top of the aisle, barefoot, no veil, holding wildflowers. She looked at me, not past me, not around me, at me, and she mouthed, "Thank you." Tears slipped down my cheeks as she walked down the aisle toward Evan, who waited with shaking hands and wide eyes. They exchanged vows they wrote themselves, words about trust, forgiveness, humility. Madison spoke about generational healing, how the wounds we inherit don't have to define us, but they do demand our attention. She spoke my name. I dedicate this day to my grandmother, Eleanor McCarthy, for showing me that dignity isn't about appearances, it's about truth. And that love doesn't come from perfection, it comes from courage. The crowd stood in applause before the kiss even came. After the ceremony, Lily handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "It's from the State Film Commission," she said. "They want to fund the full documentary. They loved the footage. They want to call it Basic No More, the story of Eleanor McCarthy." I laughed through my tears. I couldn't have written a better ending. That night, we danced under the stars. Me, Madison, Lily, even Claire, who cried as she hugged me and whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner." We didn't talk about the past that night. We didn't need to. It was in the soil, in the music, in every echo of laughter from the people who had once looked past me, now circling back like fireflies to the light. And as the night faded, I sat in my old rocking chair on the porch, watching the last of the candles flicker. 66 years, a lifetime of silence, but not anymore. I was Eleanor McCarthy, and I had finally been heard. 2 months later, the ribbons returned. We started tying them again, me and Madison, just like Mama used to do every spring. But this time, each ribbon carried a name, a woman we'd helped, a life touched. There was Angela, who came from 3 towns over, fleeing a husband who'd made her feel worthless. There was Margot, 72, who'd never learned to drive because her late husband said she wasn't smart enough. There was Jenny, just 24, whose mother had cast her out for speaking her truth. They came to the farm with nothing but stories and left with something more, dignity. We called it the Ribbon House, a place for women to write new chapters, no matter their age, their wounds, or the silence they'd endured. Lily handled the outreach. Madison helped with grant applications. And me? I welcomed each woman at the gate, every time, with the same words, "You belong here." One afternoon, while Madison planted lavender near the porch, she turned to me and asked, "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" I looked out over the fields, golden in the late light. "I used to," I said. "But if they had, I might never have found my voice, and you might never have found yours." She nodded slowly. "I'm proud to be your granddaughter." Tears stung my eyes. "And I'm proud to be your legacy." That night, I found Lily sitting under the oak tree, her camera in her lap, staring up at the sky. She looked peaceful, tired, fulfilled. "They accepted the documentary into Sundance," she said softly. "We're going. All of us." My heart skipped. not because of the prestige, but because my story, our story, was going to reach women far beyond these fields, women who still sat in silence, women who still believed they were too old, too plain, too broken to rise. "They're going to hear your voice, Eleanor," Lily whispered. I reached for her hand. "They're going to hear yours too." On the morning of the premiere, I stood before a mirror in a modest hotel room in Utah. I wore a navy blue suit, pearls from Mama's old jewelry box, and a heart filled with every version of myself I'd ever been. Young, scared, silenced, and finally, free. We walked the red carpet as a trio, Lily, Madison, and me. Cameras flashed, people clapped, but all I could think about were those ribbons swaying back home. The film played in a packed theater. There were tears, applause, a standing ovation. But the moment that stayed with me came during the Q&A, when an older woman with silver curls and trembling hands stood up from the back row. "I haven't spoken to my daughter in 20 years, she said, her voice cracking. "But tonight, I think I will." I met her eyes, and I knew. This was the reason. This was the miracle born from years of heartache. This was redemption. When we returned to the farm, I found a letter waiting on the porch swing. No signature, just 6 words in delicate handwriting. "I see you now. I'm sorry." I pressed it to my chest and smiled through my tears, because I was no longer waiting to be seen. I had already become the woman I needed, and now I was helping others do the same. So I tied one last ribbon on the oak tree, bright red, the color of fire, of courage, of rebirth, and on it I wrote, "Eleanor McCarthy, survivor, matriarch, free." Then I turned toward the house, toward the laughter inside, toward the life still unfolding, and I walked forward, finally whole, finally heard, finally home. 1 year later, to the day, the farm buzzed with life. Children chased chickens in the yard, women laughed around fire pits, and from the porch, the sound of old gospel hymns spilled out on the wind. The ribbon house had grown into something none of us could have imagined, a living, breathing sanctuary. Not just a home, but a movement. There were now 4 cabins on the property, each built by local volunteers. A greenhouse, a craft barn, a circular room we called the voice room, where women could sit, share, and finally say the things they'd never dared say before. I'd never seen so many broken pieces turn into something so whole. And still, each time I walked through the field at sunset, the silence gave me pause, because despite everything, despite the film, the farm, the forgiveness, I still hadn't spoken to Claire again. Not since the wedding, not since she walked away, too ashamed or too afraid to come back, until one evening, as I was locking up the community pantry, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. Claire stepped out. No designer scarf, no pearls, just jeans and a windbreaker, and a look on her face I hadn't seen in decades. Vulnerability. She didn't speak right away, just stood there, taking in the land she'd grown up on and forgotten. "Hi, Mom." I swallowed hard. "Hi, Claire." She came closer, hands trembling. "I've watched the documentary, twice, maybe 3 times. I couldn't believe what I didn't see, what I refused to see." My voice was gentle. "You were a child, Claire." "No, I was an adult. I had children of my own. I chose convenience over truth." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded, aged photograph, me holding baby Claire in front of the old farmhouse. I was smiling, radiant, tired. "You were everything I needed," she whispered. "And I let him take that from you. I let us take it from you." Tears filled my eyes. "You can't change the past, baby," I said, taking her hand. "But you're here now." She nodded, crying. "Do you think I could volunteer here? Maybe help in the kitchen?" "I can cook." I pulled her into my arms, burying my face in her shoulder like I did when she was 5 and afraid of thunderstorms. "You don't have to ask," I said. "This is your home too." That night, we sat on the porch and watched the stars come out, shoulder to shoulder, not as mother and daughter caught in the wreckage, but as women, mending. Inside, Madison rocked her newborn by the fireplace, my first great-grandchild, a boy. She named him Elliot, after me. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, reading submissions for her new podcast. Letters from the Ribbon House, stories from across the country had started flooding in. Women sharing their truth because they'd seen that someone else, someone like them, had survived. And outside, the oak tree stood tall beneath the moonlight, its branches heavy with ribbons, some old, some new, all sacred. I closed my eyes, listened to the wind in the trees, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I couldn't quite name at first. Then I knew. It was peace, the kind that only comes when you've told the whole truth, survived the storm, and lived to dance again. And as the fireflies blinked back to life around us, I whispered to myself, I was never too basic. I was just too much woman for people who couldn't see me. But now they do. 5 years had passed since that first ribbon. 5 years since the farm had been nothing more than overgrown grass and a broken porch swing. And I was something like that too. But standing there now, watching families spill across the lawn, watching the sun glint off silver hair and children's laughter weave through the breeze, I knew one thing for sure. Every moment of silence, every cracked heart, every slammed door had led here. I'd just returned from Washington, D.C., of all places. The Ribbon House Initiative had been recognized with a national award for community healing. Lily had spoken on stage with tears streaming down her cheeks. Madison sat beside her with baby Elliot on her hip. And me? I stood behind them, hand over my heart, never prouder. When we returned, the whole town welcomed us with banners and pies and more hugs than I could count. The local paper dubbed it the redemption of Eleanor McCarthy. But I wasn't looking for redemption anymore. I was looking for legacy. One afternoon, I walked out to the oak tree, the oldest one on the farm. The wind was soft, the air thick with jasmine, and as I touched one of the ribbons, a thought struck me. I wanted to leave behind more than memory. I wanted to give voice to every Eleanor who ever lived in shadows. So I began writing my book. I called it Ribbons in the Wind, How I Took My Life Back at. It poured out of me like a river, decades of silence, reshaped into strength. I wrote about Charles, about Claire, about the lies and the losses, and the moment I stopped asking for permission to be seen. And I wrote about joy, about Elliot's first birthday, and how he'd wrapped his tiny arms around my neck and whispered, Gigi. About Madison giving a talk at a women's conference and saying, my grandmother's fire saved us all. About Claire, standing in front of a group of survivors at the farm and sharing her own story of healing, voice cracking, finally free. The book hit shelves the following spring. It became a quiet bestseller, but more than that, it became a lifeline. Letters arrived from Kansas, New Mexico, Ohio, women in their 60s, 70s, even 90s, telling me they'd walked out of bad marriages, reconnected with estranged children, started painting again, started living again. One woman wrote, your story didn't just change my life, it gave it back to me. I kept each letter in a box I called the Second Chances drawer. Then, one morning in late autumn, as golden leaves danced around the porch, I got a knock on the door. It was Charles, older, stooped, holding a bouquet of white lilies. I know I don't deserve a minute of your time, he said, his voice trembling. But I wanted to tell you in person, I was wrong. About everything. I looked into his eyes and saw the man I once loved, and the man who had failed me. Both. I forgave you a long time ago, I said softly, but I'll never forget what you taught me. He nodded, eyes misty. And what was that? That I never needed anyone's permission to matter. He placed the flowers in my hands. Goodbye, Eleanor. Goodbye, Charles. I watched him walk away, not with bitterness, but with closure. And that night, beneath the stars, I sat beside Lily and Madison and little Elliot as we tied one final ribbon to the tree, bright white, the color of truth. It read, she rose in silence, and the world finally listened. I smiled at them. At this family we'd built from brokenness and light, and I knew, not every story ends in tragedy. Some end in triumph. Mine did. And I wasn't just heard, I was honored. At D they told me I was too basic. At I was legendary. The day I turned 72, the sky opened up with the kind of slow, golden rain that feels more like a blessing than weather. There was a party, of course, Madison insisted. Tables lined the front lawn of the Ribbon House, each covered in white lace and vases of wildflowers. Women from all over the country flew in. Guests hugged, laughed, shared stories of healing and courage like sacred rituals. But this year, something was different. I didn't feel like a guest of honor. I felt whole. The speech was simple. I stood before them, holding Elliot's hand. He was 6 now, bold and wild and sweet. I spent most of my life thinking my story was too quiet, I told them. Too simple, too basic. Laughter rippled. But what I know now is that the world is built on women like us. Women who survive, who rebuild, who hold up generations and never ask for applause. Applause came anyway. After the cake had been cut and the sun began to dip behind the fields, I slipped away to the oak tree, barefoot and smiling. There was one ribbon left to tie. Red velvet, soft but strong. On it in silver ink, I wrote, "For every woman who thought it was too late." As I knotted it around the branch, I looked up at the ribbons dancing above me, hundreds now, a forest of stories. Then I sat on the old bench beneath the tree, the same one where I used to cry. Only this time, I closed my eyes and gave thanks for the betrayal, for the silence, for the fire, because it all led me here. And here, I was not just alive, I was eternal. Eleanor McCarthy's name was no longer a footnote. It was a force, it was a lighthouse, it was a legacy. And as the wind sang through the branches, I leaned back, laughed softly, and whispered to the sky. I was never too basic. I was a storm in a teacup, and they just weren't ready. Now they are, and they'll never forget me. It was early morning when the letter arrived. Thick cream paper, no return address, just my name, written in elegant script that trembled slightly with age. I opened it slowly, the way you open something you know is about to shift the ground beneath you. Inside was a single line. "My name is Margaret. I'm your sister." I froze. No sound in the kitchen, no breeze. Even the ticking clock seemed to pause. Margaret, a name I hadn't heard since I was a child. A ghost, really. One whispered in hushed tones, buried in family silence. My mother once wept in the garden and said, "There are some things too heavy to speak of, Ellie." I never pushed. I never knew. Until now. I read the letter again. They told me you died at birth. I believed it for decades. Then I saw your name in a magazine, read about the ribbon house. I knew. You look like Mama. You sound like me. Eleanor, I'm your twin. My knees buckled, and I sat hard at the kitchen table, heart pounding like 1,000 old doors flying open all at once. I spent the day in a daze. I pulled out family photos, scrutinized every face, every whisper of resemblance. How could this be true? How had this been hidden? Then I remembered something my father said once, during one of his rare tender moments. You were never meant to be alone. That night, I called the number she left. It rang twice. Then a voice answered, shaky, breathless. "Ellie?" And just like that, everything realigned. She was real. She was mine. We talked for hours. Our childhoods, our mother's pain, the way fate had kept us apart, and then brought us full circle. She'd lived in Oregon her whole life, never married, no children. A quiet life, always feeling like a part of her had been missing. I invited her to the farm. When she arrived, the moment was nothing short of divine. Two women, weathered and wise, staring into a mirror neither knew existed. We hugged for a long time. No words, just tears, just time healing what time once stole. Margaret now lives in the guest house by the garden. We spend our mornings in rocking chairs, trading stories we didn't know we shared. She ties ribbons, too, one for every year we lost. And the last ribbon, gold, shimmering, defiant, reads, "Even time can't stop the truth." I never thought I'd find new family at 72. I never thought my life would open even wider. But here we are, still becoming, still rising, still proving that the best stories are the ones that refuse to end when the world tells you they should. And mine has only just begun again. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.